It was supposed to be the perfect New Year's Eve getaway. After months of planning, Emily and her boyfriend Nathan had finally arrived at a cozy cabin in the mountains. The air was crisp, the stars sparkling above, and the fireplace crackled with warmth. They'd spent the last few weeks dreaming about this trip, picturing quiet nights and romantic mornings. It was supposed to be the reset they both needed. But that night, everything took an unexpected turn. The evening began like any other, with the two of them sipping wine and laughing over dinner. Nathan had even surprised Emily with a small gift, a silver necklace she'd been eyeing for months. The atmosphere was perfect, and they couldn't have been more in love. They had plans to ring in the new year together, just the two of them. Around 11 p.m., as the night started to unfold, Emily excused herself to use the bathroom. Her phone, left on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a sudden notification. She returned to the room just in time to catch Nathan hurriedly glancing away from the screen. It was odd. Nathan wasn't one to hide things from her, and the way he reacted to the phone was suspicious. Her heart skipped a beat. Before she could question him, Nathan's phone rang. He looked at the screen, his face draining of color as he muttered something about needing to step outside. He left, leaving Emily behind, confused and uneasy. It wasn't like him to act so strangely. Curiosity gnawed at her, and against her better judgment, Emily grabbed Nathan's phone. Her heart pounded as she unlocked it using the fingerprint sensor, something she never thought she'd do. There, in full view, were a series of recent texts from an unknown number, flirting and laced with promises of a secret meeting. Emily's breath caught. The texts weren't just friendly banter. They were explicit and suggested an affair. One message, sent just that morning, made her blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Don't worry about her. She'll never know." Without thinking, she called the number back, her hands trembling. The phone rang once, twice, before someone picked up on the other end. A woman's voice. "Hello. Who is this?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. The woman paused, as if caught off guard. "Who is this?" Emily's mind raced, but the name she heard next stunned her. "It's Rachel." "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm Emily, Nathan's girlfriend." "What's going on?" The line went silent for a moment. Then Rachel spoke, her voice filled with guilt. "I don't know what to say. He promised me he'd be with me tonight. He said he'd be free for us. I didn't know you were here." Emily stood frozen, the phone pressed to her ear. Nathan's betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was real. Her romantic trip had turned into a nightmare in the span of a single call. Without a word, she hung up. The weight of the moment crushed her, and she had to sit down. Nathan returned soon after, his face flushed from the cold air outside. But as soon as he saw Emily's expression, he knew something was wrong. She didn't need to say a word. The silence between them said everything. Nathan tried to explain, but his words felt empty. He apologized over and over, but it was too late. Emily had heard enough. The relationship she thought was perfect had been shattered by lies and deceit. The New Year's Eve they dreamed of was gone, replaced by a reality far uglier than she ever could have imagined. With one silent call, everything had fallen apart. The romantic trip they had planned was now nothing more than a painful memory, a stark reminder that some things can never be undone. The silence between them stretched on, as the weight of Nathan's betrayal hung thick in the air. Emily didn't know what to say anymore. The romantic getaway she had envisioned, full of laughter and connection, had been transformed into something unrecognizable. She stood up, her legs weak beneath her, and walked to the window. The snow fell gently outside, blanketing the landscape in a pristine, cold silence that mirrored the emptiness inside her. Nathan stood there, his hands trembling at his sides, watching her, waiting for a reaction. He had expected anger, maybe tears, but this silence, it crushed him. He had never seen her like this before. Emily had always been so full of life, so forgiving. But now, in that moment, He realized that the trust he had taken for granted had vanished, irreparably broken. "I can't believe this," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face him, her eyes searching his as if trying to find a shred of the person she once knew. "You told me you loved me. You promised me we'd have this time together, and you—" She choked on the words. "You're seeing someone else." Nathan stepped forward, his voice cracking with desperation. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Emily cut him off, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How do you call something like this a mistake? You've been planning this, lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. You don't just accidentally fall in love with someone else, Nathan." He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. There was no excuse, no way to justify what he had done. He had known all along that his actions would hurt her, but the guilt he now felt was suffocating, and it came too late. "I didn't know how to tell you," he whispered, his voice full of regret. "I thought I could keep it all together, but I couldn't. I'm so sorry." The tears Emily had been holding back finally fell, but they were not the tears of hurt that Nathan had anticipated. They were tears of clarity. She wasn't crying because she loved him. She was crying because she realized she had been holding on to something that was never truly there. The love she thought they shared was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion. She wiped her tears away and looked him in the eye, her expression hardening. "I need to leave, Nathan. I need to get away from here. I can't even look at you right now." Nathan's face paled. "Emily, please. Don't go. I know I messed up, but we can work through this." But Emily was already shaking her head. "No, it's too late for that. There's nothing left to fix. I gave you everything, and you threw it away." Without another word, she turned and grabbed her coat from the hook by the door. She didn't care about the storm outside, or the fact that it was well past midnight. She needed to get away, needed space to think, to breathe, and to find herself again. Nathan reached out, but she pulled away, walking out of the cabin and into the cold night. Her breath fogged the air as she trudged through the snow, her mind racing. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. Her heart was broken, but her determination was stronger than ever. As she walked, her thoughts began to clear. She realized she didn't need Nathan to define who she was. She was strong enough to rebuild, to walk away from this chapter of her life, no matter how painful. Back at the cabin, Nathan stood by the window, watching her disappear into the night. His heart shattered, but there was nothing he could do now. The woman he had loved, the woman he had betrayed, was walking away from him, and no apology could undo the damage he had caused. The new year had begun, but for Emily, it wasn't the start of a fresh chapter of love. It was the beginning of something much more important. The beginning of healing, of reclaiming herself, and finding her way forward without the weight of someone else's lies holding her back. As Emily trudged through the snow, her mind began to settle. She wasn't thinking about Nathan anymore, or the cabin, or even the trip that was supposed to be their fresh start. She was focused on one thing, herself. The cold air bit at her skin, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional pain she had just endured. The night was silent, save for the crunch of her boots on the fresh snow and the occasional gust of wind that whispered through the trees. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. It was Nathan, no doubt. He had probably realized by now that he had lost her, but she wasn't ready to talk to him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After walking for what felt like an eternity, Emily came across a small, dimly lit inn, nestled at the edge of the woods. The warmth of the place beckoned her, a welcome refuge from the frigid night. She hesitated for a moment, her gaze drifting back toward the path she had come from. But then she walked inside. The air inside was warm, and the soft glow of the fireplace soothed her frayed nerves. She approached the counter, where an older woman with kind eyes looked up from behind the register. "Is everything all right, dear?" the woman asked gently, noticing the tears still fresh on Emily's face. Emily forced a smile, though it barely reached her eyes. "I just need a place to stay for the night." The woman nodded and gave a soft, understanding sigh. "Of course. You're welcome here. Let me get you a room." As Emily sat in the small, cozy room later that evening, her emotions swirled. The quiet of the inn gave her the space to think, and as the fire crackled in the corner, she reflected on everything that had led her to this point. Her relationship with Nathan had always seemed perfect from the outside. They'd been together for 3 years, and everyone around them had assumed they were the ideal couple. But it was all an illusion. Nathan had shown her a side of himself she hadn't known existed, and now that she was free from the constraints of the lies, Emily could see the truth. She thought back to all the small moments, the ones she had brushed off before, the late nights when he'd been distant, the times he would disappear for hours without explanation, the way he'd often been overly protective of his phone. How had she missed it? How had she been so blind to the signs? But then again, she couldn't blame herself. She had trusted him, loved him. Trust, once broken, was impossible to rebuild. And as much as she wished things had turned out differently, Emily knew she couldn't keep holding on to someone who didn't respect her enough to be honest. The sound of her phone ringing again interrupted her thoughts. This time, she didn't hesitate. She answered, but only to hear Nathan's voice pleading on the other end. "Emily, please. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? I know I've hurt you, but I never wanted to lose you. Please don't leave me." His words were frantic, filled with regret, but they didn't move her anymore. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. "I don't think there's anything left to talk about, Nathan," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "You made your choice. And now, so have I." She ended the call without another word, setting her phone on the nightstand. It felt liberating, a small but significant act of reclaiming control. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need his promises. What she needed was time. Time to heal. Time to rediscover who she was outside of a relationship that had become a cage. The rest of the night passed in a blur of quiet reflection. The fire flickered low, casting long shadows across the walls. Emily eventually fell into a restless sleep. But when she woke the next morning, there was a sense of calm she hadn't felt in days. It was a new year, but more importantly, it was a beginning of a new chapter for her. One where she wouldn't allow anyone, not even someone she loved, to define her happiness or her worth. The journey to healing wouldn't be easy, but Emily was stronger than she had realized. She didn't need Nathan to validate her. She had already learned the most important lesson. She was enough, all on her own. When she left the inn the next morning, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. The world felt fresh and full of possibility, and Emily knew that while the past would always linger in the background, she was no longer tethered to it. The future, her future, was hers to create.